I'm in Argyle Street, but it's not Argyle Street in Glasgow. In fact, it's Argyle Street in Ulverston. And then just over here, there's a house for sale. But at number 3 Argyle Street, this is where Stan Laurel was born on the 16th of June, 1890. I'm in the lovely town of Ulverston in Cumbria, north of England, and this is the town that Stan Laurel was born in.
Down from the blue vault of the skies, you, Stan Laurel. You're born at Ulverston in Lancashire, England, right, Stan? And your stage name is now Stan Laurel. What was your real name, Stan? You want to tell her? You want to tell her?
My real name?
Your real name?
Jefferson.
Jeff, that's nice.
Stanley Jones.
Stanley? Was there a name before that?
Arthur.
Arthur Stanley.
This statue here was unveiled by Ken Dodd in 2009. It's at the Coronation Hall in the centre of Ulverston.
Double act, and probably the most famous, the most wonderful, the most fabulous comedians ever in the history of show business.
This is the Lorne & Hardy Museum just in here. It also serves as a cinema.
Tell me about my dear daddy. Is it true he's dead?
Well, we hope he is. We buried him.
It can't be. What did he die of?
He died of a Tuesday. Was it Wednesday? Do you remember?
Didn't you tell me once that you had an uncle?
Sure, I've got an uncle. Why?
Now we're getting somewhere. Is he living?
No, he fell through a floor and broke his neck.
Was he building a house?
No, they were hanging him.
How do you expect me to concentrate?
If you must make a noise, make it quietly. Ladies and gentlemen.
With your hat off.
I beg your pudding. Ladies and gentlemen, with your hat off.
You don't need to say that.
Ladies and gentlemen.
You said that once.
All right. I'm so happy to be with you here tonight in London, Scotland.
That's done it. No more speeches.
We've got to do something.
Maybe I could sing a little song.
Say, that reminds me.
What?
I wish I brought my piano with me from America.
You don't have to bring a piano all the way from America. There's plenty of pianos here.
I know, but I wish I brought mine.
Why in your wildest dreams do you wish you had brought your piano with you?
Well, I left our return tickets on top of it, and
That's another fine mess you've got us into.
I was born in England, in Ulverston, Lancashire, and my family were a theatrical family, so I've been associated with the business since I was born. My parents were in the dramatic business. My dad wrote shows and produced shows and also had a circuit of theatres around the north of England. So I was born in Lancashire, but I was raised in several parts, in Durham, around the Tyneside, and finally up in Glasgow, Scotland. I received most of my education.
What is a comet?
It's a star with a tail on it.
Very good.
Name one.
Lassie the dog? Your bath's ready.
I can't take a bath with this sore foot. Plus, it's not Saturday.
Charlie tells me you're from Los Angeles. What part?
All of me.
If you want me to go, I'll stay as long as you like.
Of anything military. I love a parade, a handful of vets, a line of cadets, or any brigade. For I love a parade.
I'm in Rutherglen, and this is 57 Buchanan Drive. Previously this was known as Craig Lee, but I noticed that they've changed the name of the house, probably to keep away discouraged people like me. But from the age of about 14 to 16, Stan Laurel lived here from about 1905 to 1907, when his father had moved from North Shields up here to manage the Metropole. Behind me is Stone Law School, also in Rutherglen, and this is just 5 minutes walk away from where Stan was staying. So he came here to school. It's supposed to be on his own admission. He didn't attend school too regularly. He would go and play truant. Later, he went briefly to Mount Florida School, and on his own admission, he used to sometimes go to the River Cart fishing.
When schoolmasters called the roll and came to the name of Arthur Stanley Jefferson, they seldom got an answer. Why was that, Stan? Were you there all the time? Sometimes you used to sort of like to skip school once in a while, didn't you?
Once in a while.
Once in a while. And as you... What are you laughing at, Mr. Hardy, over here? Yeah, all right. As you...
So even at an early age, his mind was elsewhere about his future, but he did come to regret this, and with his daughter, he emphasised that education was very important, and he wanted her to have the education that he felt he didn't fully have. But obviously, he learned enough for his profession. I'm at Craig Miller Road, number 17, and this is the south side of Glasgow, sort of Langside, Mount Florida area. And just up there, the top right, the brown window, that was where Stan Laurel lived from 1907 to 1908, and his mother, as far as I understand, carried on living there until her death. She died quite young, when she was about 47. We've already been to her grave. They had lived in Rutherglen before that, and then they moved here. I'll just check, see if his name's still on the door. No, doesn't seem to be there.
Glasgow, Scotland, I received most of my education. But anyway, it was in my blood, and I didn't have much education. It was my own fault. I had every chance, but I don't know, the spirit of the theater was in me, and education didn't mean it. It was more glamour.
mid-8 Brisbane Street, no distance from where Stan himself was staying, and this is where his older brother George was living. And while living here in 1907, his brother George was married and they had a baby, Eileen, and this was Stan Laurel's oldest niece, born here. Stan was very close to his older brother. They grew up steeped in theatre tradition, not just in performance, but also from the business side, as their father, Arthur, as well as being an actor in his younger days, became better known as a theatre manager both in the north of England and, as we shall see later, in Glasgow. Both of these traditions of acting and the business of theatre would be passed on to his sons. This is Eggleton Street in the south of Glasgow, near the city centre. On the right is the O2 Academy, previously the New Bedford Cinema, which opened in the early 30s. On the left is the old Coliseum building, demolished in 2009. When it was demolished, some of the original features were revealed, including the original sign. This is how the Coliseum would have pretty much looked when Gordon took over the management in March 1913. It was a magnificent building that had opened in 1905. It held around 4,000 people. In Eggleton Street, and as we saw, this is the O2 Academy, and behind me was where the Coliseum stood. The Coliseum was built in 1904 but was demolished in 2009, which I feel is a real tragedy because it was a classic building, and it's a pity, unlike what is now the O2 Academy, it couldn't have been preserved and used a different function. Another piece of Glasgow gone. It's evident that George was a very good manager. Contemporary reviews say, "Sorry, no room tonight," is a phrase familiar to manager Jefferson. Interestingly, the same review talks about George Formby. This is not the George Formby that most of us know, who became famous for singing and playing the banjo. This is actually his father, George Formby Sr., who was also an entertainer. That night, he played a new number which got a lot of praise, and the number is called "I Parted My Hair in the Middle."
One night with a girl, you'll agree, I had an appointment and so, and as I'm just a little bit phony on her, in my best Sunday clothes I did go. I got her a nice bunch of flowers from a dustbin just up the back street. Then I stood in front of the looking glass there to make my appearance complete. Then I parted my hair in the middle, in the middle, in the middle. Then I noticed our tomcat was washing his face on the front doormat. He carefully curled his moustache, and at me his left eye did twiddle. Then I knew that he'd got an appointment as well, 'cause he'd parted his hair in the middle.
Another controversial booking by Gordon was of Jack Johnston, the first black heavyweight boxing champion of the world, who arrived in the UK in September 1911 and toured British music halls doing a review show which included fighting volunteers from the audience and an occasional song or two. Bishops, university heads, and even a young Winston Churchill criticised this tour because they did not like the idea of a black man being hero worshipped by the indigenous white population. It's tragic what happened to Gordon subsequently. In 1917, he was forced to leave his employment at the Coliseum, where he'd obviously been very successful, and due to the war effort became an engineer to do with submarines. Subsequently, he returned to the theatre, doing some playwriting and acting. For example, he was the principal actor in a play called Kilts and Kisses. I suppose it was hard to make a living from the theatre, maybe, and he went back to the north of England, where he got a job with Nestle. Unfortunately, while doing this job, he was convicted of fraud and sentenced to 4 months in jail. He then came back up to Glasgow and got a job in a cinema. I suppose for him, by then Stan, his younger brother, was famous, and maybe he had a sense of inferiority. But working in the cinema, he again was found to be embezzling money and was dismissed. So once again he returned to the north of England and became homeless, and then at the age of 53 he died in a Salvation Army hostel. That was on the 29th of October 1938. His wife and his daughter never left the west of Scotland, and they actually both died in the same year, 1951, while living in Kirkintilloch. I get a lot of my information from this book here, which I'll definitely recommend. This book focuses on Arthur Jefferson, Stan Laurel's father, who was quite a character. I'll put a link on how to buy this book at the end, because I would definitely recommend it. Not written by me or anything. But so let's have a look at some of the places in Glasgow which we can associate with Arthur Jefferson. When Arthur Jefferson first relocated to Glasgow in 1906, he established an office at 2 Queen's Park Terrace, which we're looking at now. He was the manager of the Metropole Theatre in Stockwell Street, but still had responsibility for a couple of theatres in the north of England. He was also acting as an agent, promoting plays that he had written, but also promoting artists and so on throughout the whole of the UK. As we can see, this was a magnificent terrace designed by none other than Alexander Greek Thomson, who many consider to be Glasgow's greatest architect. And how does this site of Scottish architectural significance look today? Let's have a look! The terrace was demolished in 1981 and the flyover was built. Glasgow is one of the few cities which has a flyover which runs right through the middle of the city. Questions have been asked about how this came to be, because so much of Glasgow's great architecture was destroyed in the process. What is amazing is that this won an award in 2012, but I think people can judge for themselves. They did not get their hands on the Abbotsford School, and this is a school which Arthur would have recognised as he left his office, which would have been round about here, and walked in to Stockwell Street. This is where Arthur worked at the Metropole Theatre, which was to the left of the very famous Scotia Bar, very famous in Glasgow. For example, Billy Connolly used to do concerts here. What's amazing about the Metropole is the small entrance, but the entrance was more like a tunnel, because when you went through this entrance, you came to a very tall building, as we can see here. So behind me is, beside the Scotia, is where the original Metropole Theatre was, which was managed by Arthur Jefferson, Stan Laurel's father, and this is where Stan Laurel came after he had done his first performance along the road at the Panopticon. I'm 6 floors up on Clyde Street here, and to the back of me round there, Stockwell Street. Because we're up so high, it was actually a very, very high building. I might be round about the gods of where the Metropole Theatre was. This is the back end to the Panopticon, which was jokingly called the Pots and Pans. And Stan Laurel, at the age of 14, did his very first ever performance here. His father was the manager of another music hall. He was too embarrassed to let his father know that he was going to perform, because his father had been a performer, as had his mother, but his father had found management to be more lucrative and was encouraging Stan to go into that end of show business. But the owner of this place was a legendary character, J.K. Pritchard, and he actually told Stan's father that he was performing. So Stan was on stage. It wasn't till near the end of his performance that he saw his father. He tripped up. He got the biggest laugh of his performance, so it was a learning experience for him. But actually, after he came off stage, his father told him he was extremely proud of him. That night, they had a celebratory drink, and he said it was the happiest night of his life, and he spoke about this.
I removed my makeup and rushed back to the Met to hide from my father's wrath. But he was already there. He called me into his office, where for what seemed like several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, he glanced at me and said, "Not bad, son, but where on earth did you get those gags?" Fearfully, I told him the whole story and waited for the storm to burst. Slowly, he rose to his feet. "Have a whiskey and soda?" he asked quite casually. At first, I could not believe my ears, but when it dawned on me, I seemed to grow 6 inches in as many seconds. My boyhood was behind me. Dad was accepting me as a man. Then I did the silliest thing. I burst out crying. Putting his arm around me, he led me into the theater bar, and with eyes glistening, introduced me to his friends as my son Stan, the new comedian. Was I proud? I still think it was the greatest moment of my life.
The oldest theatre in Glasgow is the Theatre Royal, which was built in 1867. it still stands in Hope Street, a theatre which Stan would have been familiar with. But more important in Stan's story is a theatre which stood round the corner. This theatre, which we can see the entrance to on the left, was known as the Grand Theatre. Built in 1881, it held around 2,000 people. It was later rebuilt in 1919 and was known as the New Grand and also the New Grand Picture House. It finally closed in 1959, but Stan, probably through a contact with his father, came here to audition for the Fred Carnot Theatre Company. This would have been exactly where the front door was to the Grand Theatre. So Stan would have come here and auditioned for the Fred Carnot Theatre Company, who were a travelling theatre company, and he was successful in this audition. Behind me is where the Grand Theatre stood in Kirkcaldy, and this is where Stan Laurel came, and he auditioned for Fred Carnot and very quickly joined the Fred Carnot Company and was sent down to Manchester, where he was an understudy for Charlie Chaplin. And this is where Charlie Chaplin and Stan Laurel, I would think, almost certainly first met, because Stan Laurel successfully auditioned to be the understudy for Charlie Chaplin. They then went down to Manchester, and quite quickly they were on the boat across to New York, so we can see them here together on the boat to New York. This, you may think, is a photograph of Charlie Chaplin, but actually this was a photograph taken in 1916 of Stan Laurel. Already Charlie Chaplin had made this character famous, but there is a school of thought which says he took a lot of ideas for this character, the tramp, from Stan Laurel. The two of them had a bit of a rocky relationship. Stan always said that Charlie was a genius, but he thought of him as a bit mean